What if your car could refuel itself, not at a gas station, not at a charging point, but simply by sitting in the sun? That's not science fiction anymore. It's the dream behind Aptera, a solar electric vehicle that promises ultra-efficiency, independence, and freedom from the plug. But dreams don't always become reality. So, can Aptera truly succeed in today's automotive world? Or will it need the world itself to change first? At the end of last month, Aptera shared something that got both fans and skeptics buzzing. Their first long-distance road trip with one of their earliest production intent vehicles. The car, affectionately named Hermes, covered over 300 miles on a single charge, journeying from the cool highlands of Flagstaff, Arizona, through the iconic Route 66, before rolling into California's Imperial Valley. It wasn't just a joyride, it was a statement. Under partly overcast skies, Hermes' built-in solar panels managed to harvest over 545 watts of clean energy from the sun. And the results? A remarkable 122 watt-hours per mile, or roughly 8.3 miles per kilowatt-hour, a figure most EVs can only dream about. Sure, it didn't quite hit Aptera's ideal target of $100 watt-mile. But considering Hermes was a test car built for fast disassembly, not record-breaking efficiency, the outcome was still extraordinary. The test wasn't perfect. Few things pioneering ever are. The route had a net downhill gradient, sparking debate about how much the terrain influenced the results. Yet even with that in mind, the efficiency numbers were leagues ahead of any vehicle with 3 wheels, or even 4. And that's what makes this story fascinating. Because while Aptera's achievements look promising, the real question isn't whether the car can drive efficiently. It's whether people will drive it at all. Before diving too deep, let's get a few things straight. I love unconventional EVs. I'm one of those odd souls who gets excited by engineering experiments, aerodynamic teardrops, and radical efficiency. I even put down a deposit myself, a tiny personal investment in what could be a huge technological leap. But passion aside, this isn't about fandom. It's about reality. Because to understand Aptera's chances, we need to understand its history and how it ended up here, again. Aptera's story began in the mid-2000s, when electric cars were still novelties and range anxiety was just entering our vocabulary. A small California startup had a radical idea: build a 3-wheeled, ultra-light, ultra-aerodynamic vehicle that could sip electricity instead of guzzling fuel. They called it Aptera, derived from the Greek word for wingless flight. It looked like nothing else on the road. Part spaceship, part motorcycle, part environmental manifesto. By 2008, Aptera had made headlines and caught the eye of early-stage investors. But like so many ambitious EV startups, the story quickly veered off course. Leadership changes, lack of funding, and a federal loan rejection, because the vehicle had 3 wheels, not 4, sent the project spiraling. By 2011, Aptera's dream had crashed. Its assets were sold off. The world moved on. Fast forward to 2019. Against all odds, Aptera's original founders, Steve Fambro and Chris Anthony, reclaimed their old intellectual property and reignited the vision. But this wasn't a simple reboot. The world had changed, and so had the tech. Battery energy density had improved. Composite materials were lighter and stronger, and solar efficiency had advanced. This time, the team vowed to remain fiercely independent, efficient not just in energy, but in spirit. Last year, I had the rare chance to get behind the wheel of one of their early prototypes. It wasn't a finished car, far from it. The first time I drove it, the vehicle overheated. The culprit? A simple switch that manually controlled the cooling system had been left off. The team laughed, apologized, and fixed it. Then we went out again, and this time, it was magic. The car felt unlike anything else. Light, nimble, whisper, quiet. It was the kind of driving experience that makes you think, why aren't all vehicles like this? Even though that prototype used in-wheel motors, which production models later replaced with more conventional inboard ones, it hinted at something special, something futuristic, yet almost nostalgic in its simplicity. Now, here's where optimism meets reality. Aptera has engineering brilliance on its side, but it's playing a brutally difficult game. Bringing any car to market is hard. Bringing a new kind of car to market is almost impossible without massive financial backing. Aptera's transparency about its funding struggles is admirable, but admiration doesn't pay suppliers or assembly line workers. If resources were unlimited, production would probably already be underway. But we don't live in that world. And that brings us to the deeper question. Not, can Aptera build cars? But, can Aptera survive long enough to build the world that accepts them? Aptera's comeback was perfectly timed for the idealistic wave of EV enthusiasm around 2019. But fast forward to today, and the landscape feels different. Government incentives are fading. Political rhetoric around electric vehicles has turned toxic. Some of the very programs designed to encourage EV startups have been clawed back or buried under red tape. Meanwhile, public perception is confused and polarized. To many, EV simply means Tesla. And in some parts of the country, that's enough to provoke hostility. Drivers of electric cars have reported being harassed or mocked, not for what they did, but for what their cars represent. That's not just sad, it's dangerous for innovation. Aptera's biggest challenge isn't aerodynamics, it's anthropology. In North America, car culture is built on excess, size, horsepower, prestige. Decades of advertising have sold us the myth that bigger equals better. Aptera, by contrast, represents the opposite philosophy: efficiency, minimalism, purpose. And that's a tough sell in a market where a practical car is expected to seat 5 and tow a boat. It's ironic. Most people drive alone, yet insist on buying vehicles designed for families of 7. Aptera dares to ask, what if we built cars for how people actually live, not for how they imagine they might? Here's the paradox. When energy prices rise, efficient vehicles like Aptera suddenly make sense. But when energy is cheap, consumers return to old habits. And while renewable energy adoption is growing, fossil fuels still dominate politics and infrastructure. Even though the global cost of energy is climbing, and will likely continue to, change rarely happens because it makes sense. It happens when it has to. If energy prices double or triple over the next decade, if urban density increases, if people begin to see mobility differently, then Aptera's philosophy won't just make sense, it'll be essential. In a world of rising costs and shrinking patience, efficiency might become the ultimate luxury. Aptera could be the spark that forces us to rethink what a car truly needs to be. It doesn't have to roar. It doesn't have to dominate. It doesn't even have to plug in. It just has to work. Cleanly, smartly, beautifully. And in that sense, Aptera might be the right idea, waiting for the right time. For Aptera to succeed, 3 major shifts must occur. First, economic reality. Energy must become expensive enough that efficiency becomes a necessity, not a virtue. Second, cultural mindset. Society must redefine value from horsepower to sustainability, from image to impact. Third, political will. Governments must stop treating innovation as a threat and start seeing it as the survival strategy it truly is. When these align, vehicles like Aptera won't be fringe curiosities. They'll be the blueprint. But there's a risk that in chasing growth or luxury, Aptera loses sight of what made it special. Mission drift has killed countless startups before. The key will be staying lean, humble, and focused. The company's greatest strength lies in its refusal to conform. If it can preserve that, if it resists the pressure to become just another car company, it might not only survive, but lead. Aptera isn't just trying to sell a vehicle. It's trying to sell a new relationship with energy, technology, and responsibility. And while the road ahead is steep, maybe, just maybe, the world is finally approaching the curve where Aptera's design philosophy stops looking strange and starts looking inevitable. The question isn't just, can Aptera succeed, but can we change fast enough to deserve what it represents?